The fictional detectives Sherlock Holmes and Nancy Drew are all household names that we've seen throughout our time. We've watched them solve crazy crimes and felt amazed by their special talent for seeing the unseen. Well, we had a super detective like that, only it wasn't in this century. Having said that, are you familiar with the name Robert Ledru? Almost certainly not. During the 1880s, the real-life investigator, Robert Ledru, was widely regarded as one of the most capable detectives in all of France. That is, until the investigation into a terrible crime led him to point the finger in his own direction. So why did Robert Ledru point the finger at himself? How could a reputable detective like himself commit such a crime? Everything will be made clear right now in this video. Hello, and welcome to another video. We would appreciate it if you would give this video a like, subscribe, and ensure that the notification bell is turned on for more in-depth real crime sagas like this. Let's jump right in. Robert Ledru was the epitome of the workaholic stereotype. By the time he was 35 years old, he was already widely regarded as one of the most accomplished investigators in Europe of his time. He was so thoroughly involved in investigations that he practically did not have time to sleep because he was working so hard. When he was working on one of his cases, it was not unusual for him to be awake for more than 24 hours straight. The effects of such a demanding work schedule were inevitable, to be sure. The inability of Robert to get adequate rest caused his coworkers to observe that he frequently displayed symptoms of anxiety and irritability. Robert Ledru was sent to Le Havre in the summer of 1887. At the time, Le Havre was both a port city and a resort city. There had already been a string of unexplained homicides performed in Le Havre, which included the killing of 6 sailors in the area around the port. The investigation of these crimes was beyond the capabilities of the local police force. As a direct consequence of this, the master of criminology, Robert, was assigned to assist them. He immediately joined the investigation upon his arrival. However, he was only able to work on this case for a short period of time before being ordered to take up another murder that had been committed on the beach in Saint-Adresse by his superiors. The murder took place exactly 3 kilometers away from the hotel where Robert had been staying. Robert was thrown off by the new job as he was not used to being in a position where he had to abandon cases before they were solved. However, he was also aware of the fact that the authorities had indicated that the new case was of critical importance. Andre Monet was the man who ended up being the victim of the crime. On the beach, at night, he had been gunned down. During those times, Le Havre was considered to be one of the most important resort cities in all of France. Because of this, the authorities in charge of the resort town could not allow the murder of tourists to bring the area's name into disrepute. Regarding this matter, Robert Ledru was requested to investigate on an urgent basis. However, even for a detective, there were an excessive number of gray areas in this investigation. According to the victim's wife, the family had traveled from Paris to spend their vacation in Le Havre for a few days. Because her husband was so bothered by the stuffiness of the area at night, he would frequently go to the beach at night to try and shake off some of the stuffy atmosphere. Monet did not have any adversaries who wanted him dead, and additionally, he did not have any heirs who could gain from his death. Because the police did not have any suspects, the only option left was to continue working with the evidence that they had found. However, to their great regret, there were not quite enough of them. A bullet that had been removed from the body of the victim was one of the pieces of evidence. The bullet was from a German Luger pistol. This pistol model was the most widely used in France. A vast majority of people involved in criminal activity possessed a weapon of this type. All hopes rested on the discovery of a second piece of evidence at the scene of the crime. The alleged murderer's fingerprints were discovered in the sand close to the body of the victim he had killed. The weird thing was that, based on the tracks, the perpetrator of the crime did not walk to the beach barefoot or wear shoes. Rather, he came to the beach wearing socks. The evidence that the murderer had left behind appeared to the local police to be just as pointless as the bullet that they'd found. But when they spoke to Robert Ledru, they revealed virtually everything that took place on the beach that evening. Robert reviewed the evidence with great attention, and at some point during the process, his look shifted from one of thoughtfulness to one of terror. He slipped away from the site of the crime and went back to his room, where he remained silent the entire time. He slept there the entirety of the night and then traveled to Paris the next morning. As soon as he arrived in Paris, he went straight to the main police headquarters to inform his superiors that the investigation had concluded successfully. Ledru made a plaster cast of the footprint in the sand and took it back to Paris with him. According to the cast, the perpetrator of the crime was missing the big toe on his right foot. Ledru removed his shoe, ripped off his socks, and pointed out to everyone that his right foot did not have a big toe. This was done in front of everyone in the room. Ledru's missing toe was a consequence of an injury sustained by the inspector when he was younger. Ledru also mentioned that the day he'd arrived at Le Havre, he had a peculiar feeling, and as a result, he went to bed earlier than usual that day. He did something very out of character for him and slept for the full 12 hours. In the morning, he discovered that the sand from the beach had gotten into his socks and that his suitcase had been opened by another person. He was unable to explain this, and as a result, he did not discuss the matter with anyone else. After some time had passed, he finally started to piece together in his mind the events that had transpired. He looked over at his weapon, and just as he had anticipated, there was one single bullet missing from the magazine. Ledru's account was not accepted by the authorities, but he asked that the investigational experiment be carried out anyhow. Robert emptied his revolver of its ammunition and placed it on the nightstand next to his bed. He then went back to sleep. During the night, there were 2 security guards stationed nearby his room. Their job was to serve as witnesses to verify that the detective's account was accurate. The door to Robert Ledru's room sprang open with a startling jolt right in the middle of the night. Then, Robert's pistol materialized out of nowhere, and it was used to fire 2 blank bullets at the individuals who were watching over his room. It was discovered then that Robert had a condition called sleepwalking. When a person is asleep but manages to carry out some tasks unintentionally, they are said to be in a hypnopompic condition. Getting out of bed, going for a stroll, and cleaning are examples of actions that fall within this category. However, these behaviors occasionally present a higher risk than they normally would, which is exactly what wound up happening to Robert Ledru in the end. In his most recent nightmares, he was the one who performed the heinous act that he had been tormented by. However, he disregarded the counsel of his doctors and continued to work through his illness instead of resting. This eventually resulted in his shooting of Andre Monet while he was still in Le Havre. During the trial, the defense attorney demonstrated that Ledru posed a threat solely when it was nighttime. When he was asleep, he was entirely unlike any other person. Robert was found guilty and given a sentence of life in prison, but due to his many positive qualities, he was granted daytime release. On the other hand, he was required to report back to jail every evening. He never wavered from his core beliefs, and the last person that Robert apprehended for a criminal act was himself. He continued to behave in this manner for the remainder of his life, being loose during the day and confined to a cell during the night. Robert passed away in the year 1939 when he reached the age of 77 years old. But a question arises. Why did Robert choose to inform his superiors? After all, no one wants to be imprisoned. Some may argue that he did so to maintain his image as an exceptional investigator. Leaving the case to run cold could have had a significant impact on his reputation. So what do you think about this strange case? Kindly let us know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.